people coming in to join us, but I'll jump on into our introduction and announcements. So thank you everybody for joining us for our September meeting of the Naples chapter of the Florida Native Plant Society. I'm Andy Nacarado, I'm the president of the Naples chapter, and we also have Wade Gurley with us tonight. He's our membership chair. And before we get going, just as we've been doing our online meetings the last few months, our Zoom housekeeping. So when you join the meeting, your default features were that both your camera and your microphone were turned off, and that's to help us preserve the quality of the recording. So we will post the full recording of the meeting and feature presentation to the Naples chapter website as soon as possible, usually within a few days. So if you do happen to turn your camera on, just know that everybody in the meeting will be able to see you and anything that's going on in your background. So just for simplicity, it's best to keep your camera turned off and your microphone turned off. But you do have access to the chat feature in Zoom. So if you have any questions along the way, feel free to type them into the chat. And then questions about our feature presentation, we will address at the very end of the presentation tonight. Okay, I am quickly going to switch to a different screen to talk about the native plant nominations that we have going on right now. So I'm just switching over to a different window. I think this is it. Okay, so if you received our most recent newsletter, there was a call to nominate standout native plants for home landscapes. And within the newsletter, there is a link to nominate a plant that maybe you have experience with gardening or you've seen it growing really well in your community. And what we want to do with these nominations is put together some native plant profiles that we can share through our newsletter in the future. So it's sort of like native plant lovers sharing their favorite native plants with other native plant lovers or other gardeners. So if you haven't already, make sure that you nominate your favorite native plants. If you are not receiving our newsletter, you can go to our website, fnpsnaples.org. So this is our chapter website. And right on the homepage under e-newsletter, you can click here. And it's just a simple sign up to start receiving our newsletter. Okay. Then something else that was in our newsletter that went out to members is we're currently doing a members survey. It's something that's really important. So I was going to turn it over to our membership chair, Wade Gurley, to say a few more words about this survey.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. So the member surveys we came up with just to get an idea of how best to go ahead with meetings in the near future until coronavirus restrictions are lifted, until we're able to meet in person. So the survey isn't, there's a link included in the same newsletter that Andy was talking about. And in fact, that's the only way that you can access this survey. But we do encourage everybody to take the survey, complete it by September 15th. We're going to use the answers from these surveys to better facilitate meetings from now until restrictions are ended, and possibly into the future, seeing, you know, if things go well, if people really respond to online versus in person or a combination of those. But that survey kind of tries to tackle those questions. So we just hope to get an idea from all the members what you feel comfortable with and what direction you would like us to see. You would like us to take these meetings and meetings in the future until we can choose our methods at will. Also, one thing that I think that is not included in the survey that we're interested in finding out are ideas from members and non-members on potential field trips that you'd be interested in taking, if there's some place that you would like to go and have us try to facilitate a knowledgeable person go to a certain location or a certain ecosystem or a certain plant that you would like covered, please feel free to email us those suggestions. Also, if there's certain speakers that you would like to hear or certain topics that you would like to hear in meeting conversations in the future, please go ahead and email us those ideas as well. And Andy, I can't remember, also, I can't remember if it made it into the survey. Any ideas that you might have about increasing membership, increasing the number of membership, increasing our ability to get out into the community. If you have any experience or ideas about ways that we could better reach out, please also email us those and let us know those as well, because in the future that's going to help us to be a more well-rounded society, but also to reach out and reach a wider community.
Great, thank you so much, Wade. Okay, so with that, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm getting ready to turn it over to our two presenters tonight. We have Janine Windsor and Dita O'Boyle from Rookery Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve, and they are two education specialists there. So I will now turn it over to you two ladies. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right, so let me magically try to get my screen shared here. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, how are we looking?
We're looking good.
Great, awesome. All right, well, first off, thank you so much for having us speak. We've been looking forward to this. We are not able to be in person, but we're trying our best to, interact through these webinars. I'm sure as all of you have been part of many in the last few months. And yeah, I think that we've got some great examples in our presentation here to get everybody more familiar, if you're not already familiar with Rookery Bay itself, and also the importance of mangroves to our coastline. So Dita and I are gonna be switching off halfway through the presentation, so you get to interact with both of us, and we are going to be probably trying our best to ask you some questions during the presentation, and we'll kind of keep an eye on the chat if our screens allow us, but we'll probably do most of the questions and answers at the end. So I know that Andy is also keeping an eye on those questions, and we'll try to have plenty of time for that, like I said, at the end. But really, we want to give everybody, like I said, kind of an introduction to Rookery Bay. So I do want everybody to maybe put in the chat box if they have been to Rookery Bay before, or if they think they have been in the reserve or not. Just, put a yes or no. That would be pretty cool for us to see. And maybe you'll be surprised at the end that you have been in and you didn't realize that you were in the reserve once you see our boundaries. But we will be bringing in mangroves throughout this presentation as a focus, while kind of covering, what this amazing place is that is called Rookery Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve. Quite a mouthful. And can I switch? All right. So just kind of background of how our agency is combined. We're really funded by two different agencies. We're in a kind of a national connection with the National Estuarine Research Reserves, and that is through NOAA, so the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. They currently are overseeing 29 reserves throughout the United States. And this map does a great job at kind of showcasing those, including Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and Alaska. And here in Florida, we are so lucky. We have 3 of these amazing research reserves. So NOAA does that broad regional kind of guidance for all the reserves. And this really started in the 70s after the Clean Water Act in 1972, and the focus on, you know, the fact that estuaries were in decline nationwide. And we really need to look at these bodies of water, because as you'll find through the presentation, if you didn't know, estuaries are extremely vital to the larger system, the larger marine system, and to us, to humans. So this is a really cool national network, and each individual reserve, though, has a state partner. So ours for Rookery Bay is going to be the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. I'm sure that rings a bell. And we are going to be tied closely with the particular office called the Office of Resilience and Coastal Education, or in coastal, coastal protection. I just want to ask really quick if I'm on camera, because last time we did this, my camera turned off. Am I good, Andy? Okay, quick. I just wanted to make sure since that happened last time. All right. So yeah, the Office of Resilience and Coastal Protection is amazing. We have this slide, it says 4 million acres protected statewide of like coastal, submerged and uplands. They're both kind of included, but really it's closer to 5 million at this point, like 4.9 million acres. And they kind of categorize it into these different groups. So we've got the National Estuarine Research Reserve System. It's highlighted in yellow on this map. There's 3 of them. We've got one in the Panhandle, one in the Northeast Coast, and then we're down in Collier County, as everybody here knows. And then we've got these aquatic preserves. There are 41, currently there are 41 aquatic preserves in the state. And then it also covers the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary and the Coral Reef Conservation Program. So much more is covered by the Office of Resilience and Coastal Protection, but these are kind of like the networks we work most closely with. And this, again, this is our state side, which we get most of our funding from. And here are the boundaries of the reserve. So that's why I like to, you know, I kind of say, well, maybe you think you haven't been in the reserve, but you probably have been, because we're very large. So currently we have over 100,000 acres of this submerged, mostly submerged aquatic habitat, but we do have some uplands. And our northern boundary is going to be just south of downtown Naples at the Gordon Pass. So if that's sounding familiar to anybody here, we're going to run along Keewaydin Island. Hopefully you're all familiar. You've heard of that island. Maybe you've been there. It's very popular for recreation. Very long, you know, unbridged barrier island. We wrap around Marco, and then we do cover the Cape Romano area, which is just those islands south of Marco that you see there. And then we jut east, directly east, where we border Everglades National Park. And the kind of squirrely lines, I don't know if everybody can see my mouse here, but these kind of squirrely lines that are along the eastern border, you know, as we head from north to south, that's where our the mean high tide line is. So it's not a distinct boundary, but that's kind of our guiding boundaries. And what's really cool is that we are pretty much surrounded by other protective agencies, you know, areas of conservation like Big Cypress, Panther Wildlife Refuge, Fakahatchee, Seminole Collier State Park, Picayune State Forest, Everglades National Park. Oof, there's so many. So really just that's an incredible tie-in to what then becomes, you know, the remainder of the 10,000 islands on into the Keys. So we're just kind of the beginning of this amazing coastal and well, Everglades, of the Western Everglades, so kind of the beginning there. So, but we didn't start out this way. So just quickly kind of jump to our roots. These efforts to save this now, you know, over 100,000 acres, it started on a very small scale in the 60s. And basically at that time, you know, Collier County had barely like 15,000 citizens. And within that decade, they jumped to almost 40,000. So the 60s were a big growth period for this county. And a road was going to be proposed that would connect what is now called Bayshore Drive, very close to Botanical Garden area. It was called Kelly Road in the 60s. They were going to extend that road through a series of bridges and islands over to Collier Boulevard. And that's what this map is showing, that blue line. So from the north, it would be the Botanical Garden area, now Kelly Road, which is now Bayshore. And they were going to carve into this landscape and essentially prepare to put up residential homes on these islands. But citizens were getting very worried about development. Marco was being developed, the estates were being developed, and they got together with this grassroots effort to fight against this road to nowhere, they dubbed it, because they said, no way, this isn't happening. And they were very successful in their efforts in getting people together to stand up against this, one of the initial roads. There are several different development ideas that came about to kind of impede what is a beautiful natural system throughout the 60s. So, and this original group, once they were able to stop this road from being built, they are the original citizens that founded what was then the Collier County Conservancy. So you probably have heard the Conservancy of Southwest Florida. This is their roots. So we are well connected with them. We have a long history and an ongoing, very important network with them for a lot of our efforts. Throughout the 60s, basically starting in 1964, leading up to 1970, we were able to accrue just under 4,000 acres within this decade. And it was mostly through these local citizens who did reach out and get support from places like the Nature Conservancy, as well as Audubon. And then in the 1970s, there was just all kinds of federal and state awareness happening in progress with environmental issues, right? So that kind of led the way for Rookery Bay to become this amazing sanctuary into the 70s, to acquire more and more land, and to eventually transform into what is now this National Estuarine Research Reserve. So many different groups came in and helped with fundraising efforts. Even local students helped with fundraising efforts. Naples High School was actually a place for many of the important meetings that led to what is now this amazing 110,000 acres, of well-protected and monitored coastal environment. So that's just kind of about, how we got to where we are. And now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of what is an estuary, why is it important, and why are our mangroves important? So estuaries can look very different depending on where you go. You saw that national map, right? The national system, we've got them everywhere. So you could be in Alaska, kayaking through a beautiful fjord, or you could be in an amazing salt marsh in Georgia, or you could be right here in our beautiful mangrove tunnels, in Southwest Florida. So they're gonna look very different. And for the most part, they're gonna be these transition zones where fresh and salt water are mixing. However, we do have a couple of National Estuarine Research Reserves in the Great Lakes. So, the technical side of an estuary is where different chemical bodies of water are chemically different, and they are mixing to form another chemically different body of water. So we're talking about like rich minerals coming from ice melt going into Lake Superior. That is actually, there's an estuary there. So that's just a really, really cool way to think about estuaries and how they're going to look different, but we have very similar functions as estuaries. And so this is right here in our backyard. This is actually a picture from our field station where we are connected to a main source of fresh water. We don't have a large river inflow for Rookery Bay, or any delta here, what we have is a lot of rain, okay? And that rain is going to be our source of fresh water. And it's going to mostly distribute through canals, but also across the land and into the salty water that's coming in from the Gulf. So the tidal influence is what's mixing these two together. And in the northern part of the reserve, we have a pretty large creek called Henderson Creek, and that's the main source of where fresh water is kind of funneled for the northern part of the reserve. The southern part of the reserve has more of sheet flow and rain coming in. So for this presentation, like I said, we're gonna kind of put in the mangrove focus. And I just wanna let you know that anytime we're saying, oh, estuaries this, you can pretty much substitute mangroves for the same talk. So I say why are estuaries important. I'm also gonna say why are mangroves important. Hopefully some ideas are popping in your head about why our estuaries are important, and also, you know, why the mangroves are. So here in Southwest Florida, we are unique in that we have this mangrove forested estuary. We don't have the salt marshes. We don't have fjords either. And these mangroves are absolutely amazing. They're the backbone of our system. They are going to be extremely productive, okay? And we'll get into that a little bit towards the end of my conversation. But estuaries globally, they're known for their productivity, not necessarily biodiversity, but extremely productive with nutrient cycling, food web. It goes on and on. And we'll kind of touch specifically within the boundaries of Rookery Bay for this. Habitat is hopefully something that came to everybody's mind when we say, why are estuaries important? Why are mangroves important? They provide amazing habitat, right, for wildlife. And we're fortunate in Rookery Bay to have multiple living habitats, which obviously mangroves are. So here on the screen, everyone's distracted by the sea turtle swimming away, of course, but these are some of our actually endangered and threatened species below that we are responsible for monitoring. But it's because of these amazing habitats we have within the reserve that these animals are able to use this, you know, as a nursery, as a sanctuary, and they're able to thrive. So getting into mangroves, first off, just with the habitat. So right away, just these pictures say a lot. Mangroves are providing habitat from the crown, where birds are roosting, into the midsection, where you will find small mammals, reptiles, invertebrates, down into the roots, where you will find, again, invertebrates, you will find abundant fish, all kinds of juvenile fish, and these juvenile shrimp and crabs, they are going to rely on the root system of these mangroves. And then with that, you're going to have a food web that carries out, relying on everything that is using this mangrove as a habitat. So right here on the right, we have our red mangrove. And we're kind of gonna get into the details of the different species we have here, but you can see the root structure. Water is not too high here, but you can get a good view of where these little fish are going to be able to hide. And it's the best. It's the best form of hide and seek. We have an amazing mangrove tank in our learning center. And that's so people who can't go out in the field and experience this and see it can get an idea of just how important that structure is for not only young fish to hide, but also the larger fish, okay? To hide from, or to kind of stay stealthy and to go in and out of and seek their own prey. And then that canopy, you know, we're given this name Rookery Bay because of these mangrove islands that are holding hundreds to thousands of birds. So that picture in the upper left is really important for our namesake. That was one of the things that Audubon was really interested in when they first came in and helped manage this area. They were seeing the value of these islands as critical wildlife areas. which we now have several designated spots in the reserve just for birds that are either simply resting or they're using these islands to purposely to nest. So really crucial habitat. The distribution, just to give you a worldwide view, is important because this map is gonna tell us that, well, although they're global, right, they're widespread, the diversity kind of swings. So here in the United States, here in Florida, in the Americas, we have kind of a low diversity of mangrove species, but as we move over into the Indo-Pacific, we're seeing high diversity, all right? However, if you go too far north or too far south, we don't see mangroves at all. Okay, so this really is a good kind of glimpse at their tolerance for that cold temperature, which they don't have much of a tolerance for very cold temperatures, especially at a young age. Those young trees don't do very well when you get these times of these freezes. So that's why we don't see them too far north of Florida, as far as, you know, if you're in the United States. But in Florida, like I said, in the Americas, we have low diversity when it comes to mangroves. So even though there's over 40 different species worldwide, here we just have these 3. And they're amazing. These plants are absolutely incredible for a few reasons. And it's basically what makes them mangroves, because they're not related in the way that you would say, okay, a bald cypress is related to a pond cypress, right? Or a pine tree, a slash pine, a longleaf pine, they're in the same family. Mangroves are actually in separate families. However, they have a few characteristics that bring them all together as mangroves. And one of them is the fact that they can be totally inundated with water. Okay, so if you were to take a plant from Home Depot or from your own, you have your own plants, right? You were to give a plant to a customer, visitor, and they go put it in a bathtub, what's gonna happen? It's gonna die, right? So inundation isn't something that most plants can handle. However, here in Florida, we're familiar with our wetland areas, swamps. So you say, oh, there's tons of plants that can deal with water. So, all right, what separates them after that? Well, I already told you what an estuary is, and what, you know, here in Southwest Florida, our estuary is that classic definition, salt and freshwater mixing. So if you have your wetland plant, your cypress, your flag plants that can handle inundation, well, what about if you throw salt in there? What's gonna happen? They're gonna die. So not only can mangroves handle inundation, they can handle salt. They have different methods, and we'll talk about that shortly. The last thing that kind of pulls these plants together is the fact that they are viviparous. And since we're all plant nerds, I know we know what this means. They give live birth, and that is just a very weird thing to think about, plants giving live birth, but these seedlings are referred to as propagules, and here on the screen, so if you see my mouse, let me go back. We've got the different propagules for our 3 mangroves. So our red, our black, and our white. And these are actually an extension of the tree as a baby tree. They are putting all their energy into young trees right on the parent tree. And they drop off and they're ready to go. They just need a substrate. So those 3 things are really what are combining mangroves into this one category. So I already mentioned the red mangrove has those prop roots. We kind of saw them in the water, but here's a great exposed picture. They're known for their red bark and these prop roots that kind of help them keep upright, because they're the ones who are going to be inundated almost the majority of the time. They're on the fringe. They're usually, you know, they're closest to the water. They're always submerged in the water on that soft sediment. So these are going to help keep them upright. They have these beautiful little yellow flowers and these long kind of green bean-like propagules, okay? Red, pointy head. That's what we teach our students, how to remember them. They have a very pointed leaf, kind of a leathery look and shine to them. Then we go with our black mangroves. They have a much smaller propagule, okay? Little tiny, smaller flowers, white flowers. They have a pointed leaf as well, but they're kind of a more sage color. And they're gonna be like a sage green on one side, and then the back side actually is gonna be almost silver looking, and that is gonna is actually because of what they their ability to tolerate salt. The reds actually exclude the salt from the beginning. They don't let it in, okay? But the blacks and the whites, they pull the salt in and they excrete it. So they're extruders, and they're actually extruding it through their leaves. So if you found a black mangrove, and sometimes even a white, but mostly the black ones, there'll be salt crystals right on the back. You can just take a lick. Get your electrolytes. Pioneers would use this to, keep their fish longer, their meats. So boil it down, you got table salt. And then, so for black, we say black, salt on back. That's the easy way to remember that one. And then last are white mangroves. They're more rounded leaf. They are still a bright, vibrant green, a little brighter than the reds. They have white flowers and a much smaller propagule, very small. They also have these little nodes, or they're called nectaries or nectarines. Down at the bottom, you can see an arrow pointed, and they actually secrete a sugary kind of substance. There's a lot of papers that are, questioning if this attracts certain insects that protect the plant, protect the tree, but it is a source of food for insects. And they too will extrude salt out of these fine hairs on their leaves. So it's just amazing that they're able to have all these adaptations to kind of tolerate salt. They're living in an inundated environment. What's the best way to pass on your genes? Well, you better have something ready to go that can float around for a substantial amount of time if you want to spread your genetic diversity. So they've just got it made. They've formed a niche in those latitudes where they can tolerate the temperature. So why are they important? We mentioned habitat. This is a great little video. I love showing this. If you've been living here during any type of storm season that we're in right now, but previous, you probably come to realize how important mangroves are for protection against storm surge, wave, and wind action. So this is a super cool. We're hoping to get one of these in our learning center one day, but their ability to protect our coastline from storms is huge. They also are going to protect from erosion. So the roots are going to be able to, not only stop wave action, but will also accrue sediment, silt, sand, and it's going to help build up islands, okay? And it will help from erosion further in. That's going to be important. We can talk more towards the end about, sea level rise, but, building up land, right? You have your fringe mangrove islands that can accrue all this sediment and build up a barrier island. That's really important. They also can help filter. If they're going to attract sediment and hold sediment, that's going to also hold nutrients. So, acting as kind of a filtration system for nutrients. Another protection method that they are offering. The overall system, just super important. Their existence in our food web is unbelievable. I use the word backbone because that's what they are for all these reasons. So our mangroves are, indirectly providing a lot of energy for this system. And I just think this really, this picture says it all. We've got, they're losing their biomass consistently. These are deciduous trees, so constantly losing their leaves. That's breaking down. It's becoming a food source for several small invertebrates, microbes, nutrient cycling that then goes back to them. They're really good at kind of cycling nutrients. Then you've got all the insects that are living on them, all the inverts that are living on them as food sources for birds, for larger fish, larger inverts, scavengers, our decomposers. Just all of this eventually goes out to those larger species that we depend on and then it affects us. It all leads to human services, you know, sounds kind of greedy, but that's the way we're going to have to think about this if we want to protect them, right? Is that in the end, we're getting a lot of free services from these mangroves. So that's just something really important to consider. Another thing that they do, I don't have a slide on it, is, you know, they're going to be a really big sink for carbon. So as we move forward with climate change initiatives and we think about carbon sinks and where's our carbon being stored and released, mangroves actually store quite a large amount of carbon, specifically something that's called blue carbon. And that's because that leaf mass, a lot of it just falls right down to the ground, and it stays there. It becomes part of like this detrital component down at the bottom, and it has very low levels of decomposition when it's in the water. So that carbon just sinks right down there and it stays there. So that's called blue carbon. But the soil itself, in the middle of these mangrove islands, they have very, very low levels of respiration. So again, not a lot of decomposition. You're gonna hold on to all that carbon. I think an acre of mangroves can hold like somewhere up to 1,400 pounds of carbon, which is equivalent to like you driving across the country 3 times in your car. So, you know, the emissions. So just big on the carbon, not as big as our marshes, but definitely bigger than seagrasses. And that's something that's going to be really important if, you know, deforestation, all that, you think of how much carbon is being released. So really big for the carbon sink, our mangroves are. And tied in to mangroves, I have to give a shout out to our second most important living habitat are the oysters. We have a great abundance of oysters in our reserve. We haven't seen the kind of devastation that areas like Naples Bay have seen because we're protected. We don't have all this development. And I like to tie this in with mangroves because within the reserve, at least, a large amount of the mangrove islands that you would see, their foundation is going to be on likely an old ancient oyster bed. So they're very much connected, literally. And this is a great picture on the lower left-hand corner here, of that, those young mangroves forming. Those are red mangroves forming on this substrate because the mangroves need a hard substrate. They flood in, their propagules flood in to an area that they have to lodge onto, and that's when they start putting out their roots. So oysters are just incredible, invaluable, really. They're providing habitat just like mangroves. Also a buffer for storms. Their food source, they filter. I mean, these two are neck and neck when it comes to the resources they provide for this environment and for us, for our coastal system. So definitely important to understand our oysters as well. And these two combined, but definitely the mangroves, you know, they're really supporting our marine economy here. So I wish I could see everybody to say, you know, I like to ask our audiences, like, who likes seafood? I always put up 2 hands because I love seafood. If I could afford it, I would be a pescatarian. But everything we consume, you know, a large percentage, papers vary anywhere from 70% up to 90% of our seafood industry, those large game fish, the items we think about, shrimp, crab, 70 to 90% depend on an estuary at some point in their life, okay? So without these estuaries, without this place that we're talking about today, you know, our local marine economy just wouldn't exist if they didn't have this area to forage as a youngster or essentially be born in. This is where, you know, animals are coming to have their young, or young are coming in and using as a secondary nursery because of everything we just talked about, all the habitat, all the available food. It's just amazing. So that's one thing. Plus, we're a tourism state. You know, people come here just to participate in fishing, in recreating. The beaches are wonderful, but you got people that use the Everglades, that use these the 10,000 islands as their destination, and they are spending money to fly here, rent a car, book a fishing charter, all because we have this amazing environment that, again, relies on the foundation of our mangrove forest here for our estuary. So just huge. And I think this is something that people just don't think about right away when they think about, oh, why are estuaries important? Why are mangroves important? So in a nutshell, you know, I've kind of given you enough reason where I hope you would agree with our mission. You know, we're here to serve Southwest Florida as this trusted science-based resource that works in tandem with education to connect to you, right? We want to connect to our community using science and transforming that science into something that everybody can understand and appreciate. And we want to connect them by bringing them out. And that is our vision. So we're talking to communities just like you, and we're hoping that you value nature and you want to work in tandem with it, because that's our goal. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dita, and she's going to tell you just how we get that done.
We will see how smooth this transition goes. Hopefully there's no issues. Okay, everyone hear me okay? Perfect. Okay, hopefully this slideshow will cooperate. We will see. So we have a lot of partners. Janine kind of hinted at that we're not just a solo agency. There's a lot of pieces that make us who we are. So we have a lot of familiar partners. You probably have heard of the National Park Service, maybe our university partner, FIU, which yes, they are on the other coast, but about a third of our staff is from FIU. But we also have unexpected partners, such as Red Bull. We actually have a paddlecraft event where they come, and it's like a paddleboard treasure hunt, and they help fundraise and raise awareness for keeping our estuaries nice and clean. And after Irma, they actually did a big cleanup in our creeks to get rid of all that foam that was all over the place in our mangroves. So we do have our so we're complicated. We have our federal partner, we have our state partner, we have our university partner, we have our, also we have our Friends of Rookery Bay, which are 501(c)(3) nonprofits. So they're the ones that help kind of fill in the gaps, because we do get our funding from a lot of different areas. And while the state and government, or state and federal, do their best to get us grants, keep us running, we really do rely on our Friends of Rookery Bay to keep us going. And their mission, again, is to connect people with Southwest Florida's environment and also support the work we do. And we do that through we have a big event in March, which was canceled last year. That's the Bash for the Bay. We actually do have Adopt a Sea Turtle Nest. So if you have any relative that's absolutely gaga over sea turtles, you can adopt a nest during the nesting season, which is wrapping down. So maybe wait for next year. And then we also do have eco tours you can participate in and get out in the reserve. So Rookery Bay does have 4 core programs, and these are actually standards for all of the National Estuarine Research Reserves. So those are research, education, stewardship, and coastal training. And we're going to kind of run through each one by one. So first, and really important, is water quality. Now, it's definitely maybe not as appealing as, say, sea turtles, or as sexy or scary as pythons or sharks, but it's really kind of essential to understand what's going on and putting all those puzzle pieces together. So every single National Estuarine Research Reserves use the same standard water quality parameters. So we actually have, it's called SWAMP, it's System-Wide Monitoring Program. You can go on NOAA's website and you can pull up any water quality data from any NER in the entire United States, which is pretty cool. So you could see, hey, what's going on in California? Or if you came from the Midwest like myself, you can check out what Lake Superior is doing. So it's a really fun way to kind of keep an eye on how estuaries are doing as a larger picture. Because again, remember that all these reserves, the idea got started because of the Clean Water Act. And this was really important after Irma, when we were getting some really weird results with our fisheries trawl. We only got 1 invasive freshwater species, and we're like, what is going on? Well, you can go back and look at our data sondes, which right here in this picture, Julie is checking. It's this lovely blue tube right here. And because she left one in the water, she was able to see that we had quite a long period where there wasn't any dissolved oxygen in the water. So no oxygen means anything that could move left, and nothing, and if it couldn't move, it died. So that year for our school field trips was a little bit difficult because we couldn't find any live oysters because they didn't make it. That is our first step in our research department, and hopefully my arrows still work. Okay. And then, of course, the things that catch everybody's eye, the wildlife monitoring. So we do have kind of two big areas that we focus on. Well, there's more than that, but just that fall under research are going to be our fisheries biologists. And so he is looking at the effects of a restoration project in Picayune Strand and how kind of resetting all of that freshwater flow is, how successful that is. Are the animals reacting? Is it making it more natural? And so to do that, he actually has 3 different bays that we are doing fisheries monitoring in, because fish are really great indicator species because they can move. So if the system is kind of getting more natural, hopefully you'll see a more natural diversity and biodiversity in that bay, or natural changes in the abundance of those certain animals. Now, how do we know what's natural? We have a control. So we have 2 bays, kind of one that gets too much salt water, one that doesn't get enough salt water, and then we have our more natural setting. And there is a picture of sharks because yes, they are fish. So we look at the juvenile fish, which are super important because those are going to grow up to be all those animals we love to eat, and then all the way up to the sharks and seeing how they're responding. And then in the bottom right, we have a CWA sign. So that is a critical wildlife area. And these are designated by FWC as areas that are essential, either feeding or breeding grounds for animals. So this particular one, I think, is on Second Chance. And this is for birds. So we do have in that first picture when Janine was talking about the habitats and kind of the diversity we have in the area, there's those really cute little terns. Those are least terns. They are state threatened. And they pick to nest on these crazy hot bare beaches. But it's important to them because they're right next to their food source. And so when we have all these lovely kids and visitors that are running through, doing their morning beach walk and just running through a big flock of birds, they're scaring these birds that are trying to raise their young. And if you've ever had a chance to be on the beach where these birds are nesting, their eggs and chicks are perfectly camouflaged. So it's really important to close those areas so we're not disrupting the adults or stepping on the chicks. These are also, could be mangrove islands. So for those roosting, wading birds or nesting, they could either be raising their young or just taking a break and hanging out on those mangrove trees. So there are some areas near the Jolly Bridge, the ABC Islands, those are a critical wildlife area as well. I'm gonna try to go fast, but not too fast. So let me know if I'm getting too close to time. We also have a GIS specialist on hand, and her specialty is making maps. And there's a lot that goes into this. And it's really, really important, just as much as that water quality and kind of putting all the puzzle pieces together. So she does do a lot of mapping for mapping out the different kinds of vegetation that are in the reserve. So seeing areas of where it's maybe hardwoods, or are we having seagrass, or is this mangroves? We have a little bit of salt marsh even. Or it could be helping map out prescribed burns. Or also, which is the example up here, are sea turtles. So there's this wonderful little app that she designs where you can write in here is a field staff. They are putting in the data about where a potential nest was, and then it gets put automatically onto this map and live stream so we can see uploaded right away how many false crawls, how many nests have hatched, and how many nests do we have. And so this is a really great tool that is advancing how we can get our research out to the public. And the end result is these lovely numbers, which makes everyone smile. So you can see the success rate of the year, and this gets updated every time they go out. So that's a pretty fun thing to check out on our website during the summer. It's not going to do you much good if you do this in December because they aren't nesting. So we also do have a lot of visiting research staff that do come in the reserve because we are the westernmost part of the Everglades, and since we are not part of the national Everglades National Park, the permitting is a little different, and so we're a really big hotspot for visiting researchers. So we have had some that study indigo snakes, ants, different other fish projects. We have a graduate student right now looking at bull sharks and juvenile bull sharks and their movement with freshwater influx. We do a lot of internships. So we always have a couple of summer interns, education, we have interns, our communications, helping out with our marketing. So we do really try to give mentoring the next generations of scientists and getting more science out in the world. Man, this white on white background is killing me. So that was all of our research department. Now we have our stewardship, and these guys are stewardship or resource management, and they have a really big task. So again, remember, their job is to take care of 110,000 acres of land, and there are, let's see, Jerry, Steve, Jeff, Greg, 5 staff in this, and they're not all full-time. And so they do a lot of prescribed fires, and I'm sure if you're in that kind of area around the reserve, maybe you've smelt some of these. It usually happens in the late winter, early spring, in that dry season. And these prescribed fires are so important because it's part of the natural cycling of nutrients. It's going to help break down, get the non-native species, decrease in number, put that nutrients back into the soil, and also keeps us safe, because if you're getting rid of all that dead brush, we're not going to be as endangered or get as many wildfires. That being said, there is a huge art to this. They have to make sure they have the right staff available, the wind's the right direction, and so it's this big planning process. And then you get a storm. They have to either postpone it for a year or kind of do a rain check. So it's a pretty interesting process. And protecting the biodiversity, and this does overlap a little bit with research. So research is kind of seeing how, monitoring how we've affected biodiversity, but stewardship is actually trying to help keep it safe. And part of that is doing those prescribed burns or taking care of invasive species. So this is a picture of scrub on Shell Island Road. And if this is about 1.5 years after a burn, and so you're getting a lot of really nice new growth, some of the invasive species are gone. And they also get rid of all those lovely invasive species. And this could be either mechanical, using a chemical treatment. We do have some of the biological controls that have been released in the reserve, the the beetle for the air potato. It's, again, it's a big job that they have to do. And we also do have cultural resources as well. We do have some Paleo-Indians artifacts that we have found in the reserve backing up to about 12,000 years ago. So those are Calusa and also their descendants, or pre-Calusa. So that is pretty exciting to find. Actually, the Shell Island Road where the boat ramp is, that was an old shell mound. So that's been pretty interesting for our kind of our stewardship gentleman who this is his passion. And also we have a lot of interesting artifacts from the early settlers that in the 1800s, and that includes there's a few cisterns that can be found on some of the mangrove islands where, I don't know how many of you have chosen to go out into the 10,000 islands in summer with the mosquitoes, but I have so much respect for people that came down here to Florida 1800s and thought, you know what, I can make a living here, because that would not be my first thought, but I'm happy they did. Then we have our coastal training program, which is CTP, and actually this got started at Rookery Bay and is now involved in all the National Estuarine Research Reserves. And their job is really to take that science to management. So bridging that gap of giving information to either agencies, or they could be like individuals who are trimming your mangrove trees, or your landscapers in your community, providing them the education so they can tell the difference between a non-native and a native species, or maybe know what the regulations are, and also letting our legislators know what's going on and kind of making it interesting. We do take out some of the government's officials, we'll take them out on tours of the reserve so they can actually see what it's like in these islands. So when they get a bill that says, you know, help not that we have anything to do with, you know, trying to get a bill passed, but we can show them what potentially an area is referring to. And this particular image on this slide is from Fruit Farm Creek, which maybe you have heard of. It is kind of near Goodland, and it's an area of mangroves that's a huge die-off because the road has cut off the water supply to this area. And this has been a big project that we've been working on with a lot of different partners, and CTP has been instrumental in kind of bringing everyone to the table and trying to find a solution and getting the funds to raise the road and try to get this area more green and bring the trees back. Then we have our education, who Janine and I are part of, and we don't love our job at all. It's absolutely wonderful because we're taking all these wonderful projects, this research, the stewardship that our agency is doing, and then we're letting everybody know about it. So we do target 3 different age groups, and actually some of the individuals online have participated in some of these field trips and assisted with them. So we have our 4th grade program, which is our Estuaries Explorers, which occurs at our learning center. Nice, safe environment. They're outside, inside, doing some science. You know, there's bathrooms nearby. Survivors actually takes place at our research station on Shell Island Road. So we're getting a little bit closer to that outdoorsy experience. And then our marine science program is actually based on the water or in the field. And we also take college kids out there. And then of course we have the general public. So we have a whole bunch of different lectures and classes. Currently we have breakfast with the birds going on, and this summer we do our kid-friendly programming. We did Fly Through July. We have eco tours running nonstop right now. We have kayak and boat tours. So if you are interested, definitely check one of them out, or both. And then we do have evening events. So we have a lot of stuff planned right now. So definitely feel free to go to our website, that rookerybay.org, family activities, to kind of see what's going on. And then we do have a lot of volunteers, and thank you for those of you who are also volunteering with us, who are on right now. And they really are what make it happen. We only have a staff of about 33 people, and we are really lucky compared to a lot of the other National Estuarine Research Reserves that maybe have a staff of 5. But still, we try to do a lot. So we really rely on our volunteers. This upper left is a wonderful group of primarily gentlemen who are retirees and come and fix things. They build things for us. They're called the Rusty Zippers. That's their passion. Tons of landscaping work. As gardeners and involved with plants, you know how hard, how much, not how hard, how wonderful things love to grow here in Florida, and how hard it is to control some of them, especially if it's something that you need to pull by hand, like rosemary pea or ear potato. So volunteers have been a huge help with that. And then helping out with our CTP events, our education events, and also with Team Ocean. And Team Ocean is a group of volunteers that go out and help educate the public on the water. Because as Janine was asking, a lot of times people are in the reserve and they don't even know they're in our boundaries. They don't, which is totally fine because it's open to the public. Like, we want people to come in and enjoy our resources, but they're just there to say, hey, did you know where you are? Did you know, potentially if you're on Keewaydin, you know, we recommend your dog is on a leash so it's not flushing the birds. So they're a real instrumental group to have on our team, as well, as far as reaching more people and providing that education. We do have an environmental learning center, but we are closed currently due to the pandemic. So I saved it towards the end. But when we do open again, we do have aquariums. We have our largest, I think, is a little over 2,000 gallons. So if you've never seen a red drum or a black drum swimming around, definitely come check it out. We have a lot of exhibits for 2 stories. And then we do have 1.5 miles of walking trails. The first one is paved and the other one is, the other 2 are gravel. A little more primitive, but super cool because we have sundews that grow on one of them, which I've had the luck of finding a couple of times. And I'm gonna give a little bit of plug, if you don't mind. We do have our National Estuaries Week coming up. So all the National Estuarine Research Reserves are kind of hosting this. I'm very proud to say that we kind of gave them a little idea on what to put on their schedules. But this is going to be a week-long activity starting on September 19th through the 26th. We are going to have heavily discounted kayak and boat tours. We're going to have a live virtual webinar Monday through Thursday. So we're Janine and I will be in the field with either research or stewardship on a different daily theme, kind of talking about getting you out there. You can see parts of the reserves. And then we also have some classes going on. And if you like trivia, we have a live trivia on Fridays. So you can test your knowledge. It won't just be animals. We're throwing in some plants too. And with that, I think that's it.
Thank you both so much. This was a really excellent presentation. Of course, I love hearing about the mangrove biology and the natural history, but also hearing about Naples history as well, going back to the 1960s and Rookery Bay's early connection to the Conservancy, and then all the amazing functions that mangroves and estuaries have that are important to our futures. So really, really excellent presentation. Thank you both so much. And I think we've gotten a couple of questions in the chat, but I will give everybody a couple more minutes if you have a question that you're putting in there. And I was curious for both of you if you could share one of your memorable experiences out among the mangroves or somewhere in Rookery Bay. Just a fun memory you'd want to share?
I have to say, I'm from the Midwest, and I have not been a big fan of water, generally, like speaking, which is hilarious that I've ended up in this field. And I started working at the same time as Janine, and she can attest that this has been a process. But the first time for my program, I had to get into the water and collect oysters for my 4th grade program. And there is this wonderful, delicious, squishy mud because of all those decaying mangrove leaves, plus the crunch of the oyster shells. And I am over it now after 6 years, I'd hope so. But I made so many noises that were not very professional because it just, it was a system I was not used to, and having the dark water because of tannic acids and, you know, knowing I'm the biggest thing in there, nothing's going to hurt me, but it definitely, and now I love it. I'll get off the boat and swim when I'm done doing a fisheries crawl, or I'm hot at doing turtles. I'll get in the water, but it definitely sticks out just what a different ecosystem it was from anything I had interacted with.
Very cool. What about you, Janine?
My favorite thing that involves mangroves is something unfortunately we don't do right now. We haven't done it in the last year or so, but because of growth. But on Keewaydin Island, if everybody is familiar with the island, I mentioned it earlier, there is an area of mangroves where there is an actual transect going from the calm side that you can cross through the whole entire island and get out to the dunes over to the Gulf. And we would take teachers in the summer through this transect. We would take high school students, and it's kind of like our version of a swamp walk. And for any of you who have been on a swamp walk, I think it's life-changing. I think it's something that once you do it, you're like, why isn't this a requirement for anybody who moves to Southwest Florida? This explains everything. And that's how I feel every time I go in this transect. It's very overgrown right now. So it's a little difficult to bring newbies out there and just throw them to the wolves because of how grown it is. But it's just an amazing transition to walk through. To walk through a mangrove forest it's my favorite thing. I just can't get enough of it. So, and then to see people's faces when they're so scared because it's kind of creepy looking and dark and all these weird roots and shoots are in your face and spider webs. But then to come out feeling so successful and learning, I think it's amazing. So that's my favorite mangrove, thing.
Wonderful. Thank you both for sharing. We do have a question from Marie. She asked it just a couple minutes ago, wondering how one of the trails is looking after a fire that was back in February.
It's it's very overgrown right now because we don't have our wonderful volunteers to help us maintain the trail. The new growth was stunning to see. We of course had deer and all sorts of wildlife come in to eat that new growth, you know, and but now it's just like all the native plants that have just gone berserk, because we normally have you know, regular maintenance with the help of volunteers, and we just haven't been able to do that. So it's like, it's super cool looking, but yeah, it's just come back in full force because of all those things Dita mentioned.
And one fun thing with the scrub, they recently, I don't know if it's recently, but they're finding more Curtis milkweed, which is a state endangered milkweed. So we're happy that's been found on Shell Island Road, on that area. And then we do have some kind of slough areas in the reserve as well, where we are finding some ghost orchids, which is exciting. We've actually worked with the botanical garden, cataloging them, and not going to say where though.
That's fair. Okay, Marie is also wondering, will you be able to do the usual educational experiences with Collier County Public Schools this year?
Well, the kids are partially in school. They have a few different options, so they don't have to be back in school, but still interact with a teacher. And all of our field trips are virtual. So it will be interesting to see how it goes. So at the moment, we are keeping it to staff just because we don't know. There's a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, I'm trying to find this video from after the fire that I could put in the chat box here.
That would be neat to see.
Yeah, we had an interview with our burn boss, and it's really good to give you an idea of how that burn went and you know, what the expectations were. So I'm trying to find it.
And we already do have kids signed up for our 7th grade program, and then our 4th grade. We are going to open up a little bit later. So I think everyone was just kind of waiting to see how the start of school went. So
yeah, I agree with that. Well, Janine, we'll give you a little more time looking for the video. And if anyone else has questions coming to them, feel free to type into the chat. I will keep an eye on that. We will wrap up in just a couple of minutes. So I want to say that if you are looking ahead to our next meeting, we do meet the first Wednesday of the month. So that's going to bring us next to October 7th. And we'll actually be hearing from one of those early partners with Rookery Bay, the Conservancy of Southwest Florida. That'll be Melinda Schumann is going to speak to us about how they manage part of the preserve that's on site of the Conservancy and its scrub habitat that they manage for gopher tortoises. So that is our next topic coming up, October 7th. And a link to register for the meeting will come out in the next newsletter. Open up the
video. I was able to pop it in. So it's the first link that I just put in. That's to like a prescribed fire kind of video. It's really cool. An interview with our stewardship burn boss, Greg Curry. And then I'm putting in the second link is a really fun interactive mangrove presentation that we also have on our website. It's very kid friendly. So I just put that in there too, since that was the other topic today.
Thank you so much. Lots of cool bonus and additional videos and experiences for us. So that's a lot of fun.
We can't help ourselves, you know, we're just dying to talk to people.
Understood. Okay, so for wrapping up the meeting, I was going to turn it back over to our membership chair, Wade Gurley. I think he's still around here. Here we go. Hi, Wade.
Still here. Thanks, Tita and Janine, for speaking with us. It's very illuminating.
Great.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, as the membership chair, I just wanted to kind of put it out there that if you are inspired or influenced or just looking for ways to best help the Naples chapter, actually becoming a member is the best way. You know, we understand that, you know, given the pandemic and the difficulties of meeting in person and getting the full benefits of having field trips and meetings, you know, it's kind of lost on us at this point. But, you know, interacting as much as possible, but becoming full members is the best way that we found to help us and support us. So just kind of want to throw that out there. If you have friends that are interested or anybody that you think might be interested in becoming a member or becoming more active, just, you know, send them our way. We can let them attend a few meetings, you know, talk to them, let them see what we do and what we kind of the work that we are involved in. And then hopefully from there, they will, you know, be able to join on their own if they're interested. But yeah, I just wanted to put that out there and say, if you know anybody, please share our information. It's on the Florida Native Plant, the state website. It's on our local website. It's in all, I think there's a link in every newsletter too. So easy to get that information out to people.
Thank you so much, Wade. And I hope everybody who attended tonight had a great time with us. This truly was a super high quality presentation, very informative, and I loved every second of it. So with that, I'll thank you, Janine and Dito, once again. And everybody have a great evening. We'll see you next month.
Bye.
Bye.